Hello, welcome to Hobby Chat with Adam's Hobby Stuff. So today I'm going to go through 3D printing, the good, the bad, the ugly from my perspective so far, and take you through what I've spent my hobby money on in the last 7 days. 3D printing is a really interesting topic. I've got some 3D printing models here that I've picked up recently for a Christmas project I'm going to be doing, which will hit the channel at the end of the week. Now for me, these are the epitome of the positive side of 3D printing. We've got a model that you can't buy from any supplier. I'm going to talk Games Workshop because that's mostly what I'm doing at the moment. But you can't buy these from Games Workshop, so we're not taking money out of Games Workshop. There's no IP risk. There's no chance of Workshop shutting this printer down for this model because we don't have this provided by Games Workshop. It's also a positive side of 3D printing, I think, because they were nice and cheap, £5 for a couple of models. And the casting quality or printing quality is really good. There's the odd line. We've got a couple of the printing lines down the side here, which I've quickly cleaned up. And I'm really happy with these models. I saw them on Instagram. Someone had done them. I thought that's a brilliant idea. Got the link from the company that's done them from there. Nothing negative to say about these models. Fantastic. Looking forward to painting them. There's no drawback to doing this. So 3D printing is brilliant, isn't it? Well, let's go to the other side. Let's now give the ammunition that I've just taken away with these two models. So we've talked about IP, we've talked about quality. Let's go to the end of the scale. So this here, first of all, let's talk about the IP argument. Well, this is a Land Raider. This is clearly a Land Raider. There is no denying that. This has got Imperial Aquillas on the tracks there. This has got the Land Raider doors. So someone has stolen Games Workshop's IP. Okay, quality. Let's talk about the quality side of it. There are lines that are so deep in there. Listen to the sound. I mean, that's shocking. I cannot use that. I bought this to use as a scenery piece under the foot of a Titan that I'm putting together or going to put together. That is unusable. So, there we go. That's the other side of the argument. We've got here, 3D printing is amazing, really, really happy, nice and cheap, fantastic. And we have here, we've stolen IP, the quality is shocking. Where do we sit? Still not quite sure. Let's talk about some other pieces that I've bought. So this was bought as a set of 3 for £20. These are the 2 pieces in there. Now these apparently are printed in 2 different ways. So there is, and I don't know, like I say, I'm not an expert, which is very unusual because I don't consider myself a Warhammer expert, so to say, but any hobby project I do, I pretty much have done it before. I've had a go, or at least I've seen it, and I'm very good at it. 3D printing is completely new to me. There's a level of inexperience and actually quite exciting about, starting it. So when I got this model, and this one in particular with the lines all over it, I thought, well, that cannot be right. So I contacted the printer, or the provider, and they basically came back and said, look, they're PLA prints, which apparently this is the format where it lays down the print and you get more lines with this. So well, they do it really slow, so the lines are nowhere near as deep or big as other sellers sell. Are they talking nonsense, or is this level of lines normal? But this is one version. Now they've said, to make it as smooth as resin print, you can fill it, use a filler spray and sand it down, or something called XTC 3D print smoothing. But if I have to do that, and this really is the quality of 3D printing in the PLA format, that is not good enough. And I wholeheartedly agree with every person that this is 3D printing for quality. But let's talk about the resin printed. This is from the same printer, same provider, and has said these are printed on a resin printer. Now these actually, quality-wise, look pretty good. The sticky noise you've just heard we'll come back to in a second. There are a couple of lines. There's a couple of patches around here where the quality ain't great, and a few little lines and things there. Now, would I be happy if this was a gaming model? Probably not, because actually some of the little cross markings on here, which I don't know if are showing up on camera or not, would probably, under dry brushing or some of the techniques, stand out, and you can still hear that the smooth surface isn't actually smooth. But for a scenery piece, absolutely fine. Do you know what? Really happy with this as a scenery piece. I could have a knight or a titan stood on top of that and it would look great. Look absolutely fine when it's painted up. Do have another issue with this though, and this, maybe someone listening can tell me if this is normal. Underneath we have some little holes, which the provider has told me are for to let any uncured resin come out. So obviously uncured resin must be an issue. They've said that the models can pop if there's no hole to drain it out. Now, when I first got the model, there was some resin coming out of here. I left it to one side, didn't use it for a few days, and then quite big pools of uncured resin came out. And again, I contacted the maker. I'm not going to name and shame the maker, that's not what this is about. But contacted the maker and said that these holes were leaking resin. Now they said, oh, sorry about that, there's excess uncured resin. drop it into water, let it completely fill with soapy water, drain it out, and that should solve it. Now, I did that 2 days ago, and if you can listen, there's still uncured resin coming out of here, and if I run my finger across it, you will see the grease. Now, I cast with resin a fair bit, so I'm not approaching this from a perspective of I disagree with casting and disagree with whatever per se, but resin is nasty stuff. Uncured resin on a model is not a good thing, and I'm now worrying whether, if I glue this down, even if I wash it again, is this going to happen in another 6 months, in 12 months? And will this start to lift or rise or pop or break off the scenery of my model? I'm worried. I don't know. What's your guys' perspective? So here we have a print that actually is pretty decent, but with concerns. Now, has it put me off 3D printing as a whole? Well, I don't know, because I don't know if this is typical of 3D printing or if, this is actually a poor cast and a poor manufacture. So what I'm going to do, the only way to really know is to experiment, to get some more models to do that. I'm not going to 3D print myself as yet. Maybe I will one day. But I've ordered another 3D printed set. I'll pop the pictures up on screen now, which is going to be a 3D printed train. And I think this will be a great little Necromunda project. It looks brilliant on the photos. There's no, lines or anything like that on there. And it looks like a much better quality than these ones are. But these ones looked like that on the photos when I bought it off eBay. So I've gone for a different seller with a different set of equipment, or probably the same equipment. Maybe they know how to use it better. And I think when this arrives, maybe that will solidify my 3D printed thoughts. I don't know. What I do know is that I like this train model. I like these ruined pieces if the quality was good enough. Let's think about the ethical arguments of buying a 3D printed model. Is it taking money away from the manufacturers? Well, yes, it is. Let's be honest, because if I wanted a wrecked Rhino to use on my base, the official way of doing it is to buy it from Games Workshop. Now, it cost me 30 quid for a Rhino, whatever price it is. Am I going to spend 30 quid on a Rhino to go on a base? Well, I might, but many other people might not. That's the rub of this argument, isn't it? Now, for me, 30 quid to buy a Rhino to wreck to put on a base, okay, I can cope with that, I've done it before. But 30 quid to another hobbyist might be far too much. And actually, this is, knowing resin prices myself from casting up, this is probably £1.50 to £2 worth of resin. It's a no-brainer. Now, can you afford the equipment to print it? How hard is it to get to this print quality? How long does it take? Maybe that's a question I'll answer at some point in the future by buying it myself and stepping into it. But it's not something I want to invest in at the moment, because for me, I've got enough things, I've got enough hobbies, and I know where I'm at with it. Not an investment I'm going to make at the moment. So where am I going with this? Honestly, don't know. Changing tack completely from, I suppose, that discussion. When I was at Games Workshop, and this is 15, 16 years ago, if I remember rightly at the time, they'd invested in a few of these 3D printers. Obviously the very early ones, I imagine some sort of industrial scale. And they were using them to mock up and test various models and kits, if I remember rightly. And obviously the depth of time, I'm trying to think if that's the case. And I have heard rumours that Workshop do use them for doing test models and test molds and things. So there's definitely a future in the wargaming hobby for it. It depends on you, really, whether you want to invest the time yourself to buy a printer, to do the things, to start printing these models. Now, the reason, as it sits now, that I am not going to do that is typically, what I spend on Workshop is kind of irrelevant, really, and what I spend on other wargaming hobbies is sort of irrelevant. But I like to put my money into actual physical shops. Reason being is that these are people that have, employ people in the area, but more importantly, they run the gaming events, they run the introductory activities and all those things that keep the hobby community alive. And let's be honest, buying a 3D printed Rhino offline does not keep the hobby community alive. Is the 20 quid I invested into these three models, 25 if you take these, better served by buying at my local hobby store, putting it in the hands of my actual local hobby store, which is Grim Dice in Grimsby, not overly local, it's about an hour away from me, but is run by someone I've known for years. So I would rather put the money in his pocket, because he's keeping the gaming community alive, he runs gaming events, he does those kind of things, and it has a value for our hobby community. The value for this in a hobby community at the moment is quite restrictive, because where is this going? Yes, it might be going to someone who's making money online, and they might be supporting the local hobby community in some sense. But if I was to print this at home, where is my money going? My money's going in the pocket of the resin maker. It's going into the pocket of the person who made the 3D printer, and fine, they need a job as well. But then I'm going to take this model and I'm going to go and play with it at a local gaming store. Is that fair? I don't know. It's an argument we could have forever and a day, I guess. My second argument is, look, IP does matter. It does. Workshop, or whoever we're doing this, has gone to the effort of creating this universe. And if every single person suddenly changed to 3D printing and never spent another penny in Games Workshop, that universe would die. And I'm sure we don't want that. Some of us might. Maybe we need to think. It's an interesting discussion, not one that I'm going to solve on this day. But what I'm going to do is, I've looked at these models, I've given you the bad, I've given you the good. Price is great. The bad is the quality on these and on these for two very different reasons. Just talked about what I'm going to order to, I suppose, test the theory. Is this typical of 3D printing? Look, you guys can let me know. But also, I've ordered some more, so we'll find out later whether this is typical or whether this was a one-off. Giving you my thoughts on these little models, I think these are great. And also giving you my thoughts on what it might do to the hobby community and why I think actually you should put your money into the pockets of a local hobby store. Now, talking about local hobby stores, we'll talk about what I've bought in the last 7 days. Refill with the tea. So we'll get these off and clear the decks. So I popped into my local hobby store, 2 different local hobby stores actually. One was up in Bridlington. Mighty Lancer Games is a local one that I pop to quite often when I'm up around that town of the world, and I bought a massive purchase of Tamiya cement. So why am I talking about this? I did buy it because I need to glue some models together. As you've seen on the channel, I build quite a lot. But there's also something interesting you can do with this Tamiya cement and this pot. And one of these days, I'll show you what that is. Some of you might already know. Then I popped into, again, my other local, which was Grim Dice in Grimsby. That's probably where I buy most things from. And I bought myself a very exciting Titan base. This is going to be for my night project because, you know, if you've seen the channel, I'm currently doing a Glotkin model. And it comes on a round base, and I'm using it for 40k, so I need a big base. Picked myself up some Nurgle's Rock. Doing very much Nurgle stuff at the moment, so you use a lot of it. And some more green stuff. Now, typically I buy the bigger packs of green stuff because I go through a lot of it, but they're out of stock or everything at the moment, so I picked myself up an army paper pack of green stuff. And this is one of these hobby essentials that I can't personally live without. And finally, we always buy brushes, we wreck brushes. I bought myself some new army painter brushes, and maybe next week's hobby chat I might talk about why I think buying decent brushes is definitely worth it. Other thing, and this is exciting for you old school players of games, is I've advance ordered myself the new Hero Quest. Fantastic, really, really looking forward to getting hold of this when it goes on general release January the 15th. Now, I know some people have already got this because it was on a Kickstarter, and I didn't buy it on Kickstarter because, again, I knew that my local hobby store would get hold of it. And yes, we could have put the money into Hasbro's pocket, and eventually the money is going into Hasbro's pocket, but I'd quite like my local store to take that cut. And my local stores have still got some in stock, so if you want to check that out, I'll put a link down to Grim Dice below. No benefit for me for you checking on that, but these are a couple of good guys. And if you haven't got your local hobby store of your own, why not go to them? And that's it. That's what I bought these last 7 days. Hopefully that waffle you liked. It's a bit of a strange thing to be talking about the hobby in this sense. It's not something I've done before, so maybe I'll get a bit better at it next time. So if you do like all that, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, and I'm sure I'll see you next time.